Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Hey everybody, how's it going? So today's episode is just audio. Yeah, no video, but don't worry, we've got a solid conversation lined up, so please stick around. Today, Donald Trump's whirlwind tour of Israel and Egypt.
We have waged war together, and perhaps most beautifully of all, we have made peace together. And this week, against all odds, we have done the impossible and brought our hostages home.
The captives have been released. The ceasefire is holding. Now comes the hard part. I'm Kevin Hirten, and this is The Take. Before we continue with today's show, remember to leave us a comment telling us what you think about this episode and what stories you want us to do next. Or if you're on your favorite podcast app, leave us a review telling us where you're listening from. And you might as well give us a 5-star rating while you're there. It does help the show.
My name is Haggai Matar. I'm the executive director of Plus 972 magazine, a binational Israeli-Palestinian media outlet operating on the ground. And I'm joining you from Tel Aviv, Jaffa.
Haggai, welcome to The Take. I thought we could start by talking about what this is and what this is not. What's been agreed to is not a peace plan. What we've had so far is a ceasefire and a prisoner exchange. 20 living Israeli captives and about 2,000 Palestinians. So we start with the Israeli side. We saw these pictures of joyful families in what is known as Hostage Square, and the convoys of Red Cross vehicles carrying men and women who have been held in Gaza for over 2 years. It's remarkable. What can you tell me about the people who have been released?
So this is a mixture of civilians and soldiers that have been captured and held hostage since October 7th of 2023. They are the last remaining surviving hostages. We know we're also expecting about 28 bodies of additional hostages. And this is in addition to about 200 hostages, dead and alive, mostly alive, that have been released in previous ceasefire and prisoner exchange deals over the past couple of years. These are the last ones that basically everyone was really waiting for.
Do we know anything about where they've been this whole time, how they've survived?
We know very little. I'm assuming we'll start learning more over the coming few days. What we know of some of them is that they were held in underground tunnels. Some of them we know were chained most of the time. So in pretty bad conditions. We've heard some testimonies from hostages that have already been released. Some of them have gone through conditions of torture, others haven't, but they said that the ones that are left inside are the ones in the most dire conditions. So there's a grave concern to their well-being. We have seen them walk out. Most of them are walking and smiling. So, there's definitely joy in seeing them that way. But we will still learn over the coming few days, weeks, months, exactly what they've went through.
Yeah, and then the remains of captives who have died, it might take some time because Hamas just doesn't know where some of the remains are, correct?
Exactly, yes. And it has been said that there will be some joint teams by perhaps Turkey and Israel and some other countries, perhaps. They will be actively searching for those bodies based on their own intel and Hamas intel. So there will be ongoing attempts to retrieve all of the remains.
And you don't expect that a delay in retrieving the remains could jeopardize things going forward, do you?
I think everyone has come to accept that this is what it is. Obviously, there's a will on the Israeli side to get this over with, to get everyone back. There were some meetings of families of the hostages that have died with President Trump in Jerusalem. They were asking, please make sure, not to forget us, that we all get the remains of our loved ones.
So Donald Trump is getting a hero's welcome in Israel.
I hereby announce that together with our good friend, Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, we will rally speakers and presidents of parliaments from around the world to submit your candidacy for the Nobel Prize, Peace Prize next year. There is no one more deserving than you, President Trump. No one.
He then delivered what should be a historic address at the Israeli parliament, the Knesset, and he was met with rapturous applause, a standing ovation. There was also a brief interruption from protesters. But what did you make of how Trump is being received in Israel?
The excitement is unbelievable. Just a couple of days ago, Steve Witkoff was speaking together with Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner at the Hosted Square in Tel Aviv and was received with applause while Netanyahu was booed. And similarly today at the Knesset, Trump really getting a standing ovation time and time again through this day. Really a hero's welcome. With just two members of parliament of Knesset actually protesting, standing up, holding a sign, recognize Palestine.
And I've seen it over and over again.
And they were quickly removed from the hall. But other than those two from the Communist Party, basically everyone else is really welcoming Trump and seeing him as a hero at this moment.
Yeah, he called this a historic dawn of a new Middle East. So this is very happy talk on the Knesset, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think there's just this huge gap, which is not untypical of Trump, between what is actually happening in reality and the celebratory words describing it.
You've won. I mean, you've won. Now it's time to translate these victories against terrorists on the battlefield into the ultimate prize of peace and prosperity for the entire Middle East. It's about time you...
With Trump, obviously, everything is the greatest, the best, the most wonderful. But this gap is truly humongous because we're talking about, a ceasefire deal, which was much needed and so welcomed. The pressure on both Israel and Hamas to end the one side, the genocide and the return of the hostages, was necessary. And it's a good thing that it happened. And yet, this is what it is. It's a ceasefire deal that lays the ground for future negotiations about the continuation of the ceasefire, and then perhaps further to longer-term peace. So I think it's way too soon to say there's now peace. It's way too soon for that. And we really need ongoing pressure on Israel to end its apartheid regime and to make sure there's justice and justification for all between the river and the sea.
So where does Netanyahu stand in all of this? You see him in these images smiling next to Trump, and I can't imagine what these families must think of him, considering the only reason their loved ones are being released is because the president of the United States had to strong-arm their own prime minister into accepting a deal that he could have made any time over the past 2 years.
Yeah, so this is why, Netanyahu was booed in Hosted Square just the other day. And the hostage families, the people who supported their struggle, are very, very critical of Netanyahu. And none of them, there's a few who are on the right and supported Netanyahu's position of let's fight and prioritize beating Hamas. But most of them just wanted their loved ones back, and they are very, very, very angry at Netanyahu, and have been for a long time. I don't think that they're willing to forgive him just because he signed the deal that he was forced to. On Netanyahu's part, obviously, he's trying to kind of claim the victory to say, this was what I was planning all along. For 2 years, I said, I'm going to get them back. Here it is. I got them back. And also kind of trying to control the narrative and saying it was really interesting to see both him and the Speaker of Knesset from his own party, Likud, in their opening remarks before President Trump, really trying to frame this as an Israeli victory. It's a victory over Iran with the support of the US, a victory over Hezbollah, and also a victory over Hamas. Netanyahu made sure to remind Trump on the Knesset floor that he already acknowledged the rights of Israel to control Judea and Samaria, the West Bank. So basically, and they both said, you've recognized Jerusalem as the unified capital of Israel. So they're really trying to frame this as, this is bygones. Like, we've already accepted that all of this is Israel. Now we're moving forward with our plans for normalization with the Arab world, the continuation of the Abraham Accords. That's where Netanyahu is trying to take this.
Yeah, no, he did. He got a lot of punches in. Netanyahu got a lot of punches in during his speech bashing the UN. He thanked Trump for recognizing the Golan Heights, claiming victory. It was this odd idea of thank you for forcing us to do this, Mr. President. This claiming victory, though, do you think a lot of Israelis see this as a victory?
I think that the narrative will take some time to take form on the Israeli side. It was really interesting to hear some commentators that have supported the war throughout, Israel's war effort in Gaza and the genocide, to hear them say, well, we didn't beat Hamas, but at least our values have won because we prioritized life. Those of our hostages, we brought them home. That's the most important thing. So will this end up being a story where Netanyahu's narrative actually wins, where we fought and we fought and we fought and we ended up reaching this result thanks to the military campaign? Is that something that's going to stick as the official narrative that most people adopt? It's early to say. I think there will be many who will continue reminding Netanyahu his responsibility for not preventing October the 7th, not responding well on that day. It remains to be seen what ends up being the narrative that most people hold about the war.
In the grand scheme of this conflict, in the face of this genocide that we've witnessed over the past 2 years, the fate of less than 24 captives might to some seem beside the point. But can we talk a bit about the effect this issue has had on the collective psyche of Israel? How did this issue keep the events of October 7 alive in people's hearts and minds? And what do you think can happen now that they are finally free?
So I think the reality of the hostages still being in Gaza was definitely a painful reminder of the events of October the 7th. But I don't think it was the only one. If you look at the way Israeli media has been reporting over the past 2 years, it wasn't just the hostages. You would just continuously get more and more stories out of October 7th, which I would say as a journalist makes sense. The nation that's gone through trauma of that massacre that was carried out against Israelis. At the same time, when it was coupled with paying zero attention to what Israel is doing in Gaza. For 2 years, we basically had Israelis reliving October the 7th and ignoring the reality of what is being done by Israel, by so many Israelis participating in it in Gaza. And that gap is something that I wonder whether now, with the end of the war, with the hostages coming back, there will be a path to start reshaping the narrative, to start recognizing what has happened, to start listening to the millions of people around the world who have been saying, Israel, you're committing a genocide, you have to stop. Will Israelis continue in this mentality of siege and of, everyone's against us, everyone's anti-Semitic? Or will there now be an easing and an openness that will allow to Israelis to understand what we've actually done?
We'll have more with Haggai after this break. Haggai, let's move to the Palestinian side. We saw dramatic scenes of people being released in Ramallah.
Red Cross buses inch their way through the crowds of well-wishers and family members in Ramallah. Inside the buses, dozens of freed Palestinian prisoners and detainees. As the doors opened, family members frantically grabbed for their loved ones.
We're talking about nearly 2,000 people. This is the big number that dwarfs, really, the number of Israelis released. Who are these people being released, and what are they accused of?
So there's the bulk of the people being released, the 1,700 people, are people who were arrested in Gaza that have nothing to do with the October 7th attack. We have not seen yet details of, are they even charged with anything? Some reporting that we at 972 and Local Call together with The Guardian, have done has shown that even according to the army, most of the people that have been arrested in Gaza are actually not identified as participating in combat against Israel. So these are basically, hostages held by Israel for the exact purpose of these negotiations and for a future deal. So that's some of them.
Yeah, bargaining chips.
And then the 250 people that are that have been convicted, some in suicide attacks or connection to suicide attacks, terrorist attacks against Israelis, and other kinds of attacks, killing Israeli civilians, killing Israeli soldiers, or in assisting attacks like that. So these are, in terms of like the Israeli discourse, these are kind of the worst of criminals, the people who participated in terrorism against some civilians and some guerrilla warfare against soldiers. So this is basically the additional 250.
There's some names that are missing, prominent names like Marwan Barghouti or Hisham Abu Safia. Is that surprising to you?
I think there was clearly an attempt by Israel to prevent Hamas from being able to show that it has released some of the symbols of kind of Palestinian prisoner life. I think that was definitely a goal. Also, preventing Hamas from releasing specifically Marwan Barghouti, who's not just like a symbol, but someone who has actual political power, who is, or at least estimate to be someone who can bring about unity between Hamas and Fatah, who can push for a united front against Israel and actually play a significant role in building peace through ending apartheid and signing peace accords. That is something that obviously the Netanyahu government is deeply afraid of. Well, I think for people on the left, for many Palestinians, this was an opportunity if he had been released. But in between not wanting to give Hamas that victory of having him released, especially as he's not associated with Hamas, so it's kind of Hamas going out of their way for someone who's not one of their own, would have boosted Hamas's kind of popularity to some degree. So in between preventing that and preventing Barghouti from playing a role in Palestinian politics and struggle, it was pretty clear that Israel would not want him to be released.
Yeah, there's a real distinction and an asymmetry in the language we're using to describe these two things happening. We call the Palestinians prisoners, which implies there was some due process involved in their detention. But can you clarify just what that means?
So again, like I said, some of them I think we can talk about as hostages, people who were just taken from Gaza and with really zero due process, and again with some recognition from the army itself that they actually did nothing wrong. So those are hostages. Those are people who were kidnapped.
Yeah.
I think for the people who were put on trial, obviously the Israeli military court system is not a system of justice, far from it. And yet I do think there's a difference between people who have gone through some sort of process and have been convicted of killing civilians. I do think there's a difference there.
And we should say there's about, I think, 11,000 Palestinian prisoners being held in Israeli jails. So this is an issue that is actually coming to the surface because of this event. For a lot of Palestinians who have been detained since October 7th, they're coming home to a completely different reality. I mean, take this Palestinian prisoner from Gaza. His name is Naji al-Jafrawi. Naji is the brother of Salah al-Jafrawi. He's a journalist who was reportedly killed by an Israeli-backed outlaw gang on Sunday, and he will be released only to bury his brother.
The first thing Naji's going to do is not hug his daughter or see his wife or kiss his father's hand or reunite with his other brothers. The first thing he's going to do is bury his own brother.
When you see things from Naji's point of view, it is a reminder of the enormity of what has happened, that the Gaza that he knew has been wiped off the face of the earth.
For sure, I think that the difference between what is happening in Israel today and what's happening in Gaza is, emblematic and a continuation of that gap that we've lived through for most of the past 2 years. Living here in Tel Aviv, we hardly felt there being a war for 2 years now, with the exception of, the random missile from Iran or Yemen, whereas Gaza has been absolutely destroyed. So that reality of complete destruction of a strip that was already, to begin with, suffering from conditions that the UN defined as unlivable, and that was in 2020. To look at Gaza now, the pain, the destruction, the rebuilding that is necessary there is on such a different scale that is really hard to imagine.
Al Jazeera had a split screen going. As the Knesset was making speeches and having standing ovations, they were showing a split screen of North Gaza, and it was just a wasteland. So from Israel, President Trump traveled to Sharm el-Sheikh, where he is co-chairing the negotiations alongside Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi. This body will now get to work on the 20-point plan, and we'll be talking about the particulars of that over the next weeks. But what will you be keeping an eye on to start? What do you think is first up on the agenda?
What I hope we'll see there is a commitment from diverse leaders from Trump to continue, as opposed to what Trump was saying. I mean, this is it, we have peace, everything's fine. To continue, first and foremost, with protecting Gaza and the rebuilding of Gaza, and then onward to making sure that Palestinians enjoy justice and liberation so that all of us throughout this land can enjoy peace and security. It's something we all deserve, and it can only happen once the system of true supremacy ends. I hope that what we'll see today is the beginning of a recommitment of leaders saying, yes, we wanted the genocide, the killing to stop. We wanted prisoners and hostages released. And this doesn't mean that it's the end of the road. It means that we're only in the beginning. And this is what Netanyahu has been trying to avoid. And I hope this is what we see in Sharm el-Sheikh, is a commitment to this just being the beginning.
And that's The Take. This episode was produced by Marcos Bartolomé, Haleema Shah, and Melanie Marich, with Amy Walters, Fatima Shafiq, Farhan Rafid, and me, Kevin Hirten. It was edited by Noor Wazwaz and Alexandra Locke. Our sound designer is Alex Roldan. Our video editors are Hisham Abu Salah and Mohannad El-Melhem. Alexandra Locke is The Take's executive producer, and Ney Alvarez is Al Jazeera's head of audio. We'll be back tomorrow.